Title: The Last Coffee Break. In the vastness of space, among the swirling nebulae and stars that twinkled like scattered diamonds, the human fleet stood on the brink of annihilation. The enemy was at their doorstep, the mighty Zarlaxian Empire, feared conquerors of 1,000 worlds. They were a race of towering, armored behemoths with scales harder than steel and claws sharp enough to slice through the toughest of battle-hardened hulls. They were relentless, cold, and efficient. They did not negotiate. They did not show mercy. The only thing that spread faster than the fear of the Zarlaxians was their ruthlessness. Building tension. Earth was their next target. In the human command center aboard the USS Indomitable, humanity's last hope sat gathered around a sleek steel table. A room filled with the galaxy's best minds, admirals, generals, tacticians, and Ted. Yes, Ted. Now you might ask, who is Ted? Ted wasn't a general. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even a strategist. No, Ted was the ship's mechanic, a guy who wore a grease-stained jumpsuit and often smelled of burnt metal. But Ted had something none of the others did. Ted had a plan. Intensifying. Ted, Admiral Johansen began, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. The Zarlaxians are at our doorstep. They've obliterated half of our fleet. They've hacked our systems. They're about to breach the outer defense line in less than 12 hours. What can we possibly do? What in God's name is your plan? All eyes turned to Ted. The weight of the room pressed down on him like a boulder. But Ted, well, Ted just took a deep sip of his coffee. Black, no sugar, no cream. Relax, Ted said, his voice unnaturally calm for a man about to propose a life-or-death scheme to save the human race. I've got this. Admiral Johansen raised an eyebrow. You've got this? Yup, Ted said, taking another long sip. The room was silent, save for the distant hum of the ship's engines and the occasional nervous shifting of feet. The clock was ticking. They needed a miracle. So, you mind sharing this brilliant idea of yours? Commander Elise prompted, trying to sound patient but clearly on edge. Ted leaned back in his chair, staring off into the distance as if his genius thoughts were floating just out of reach. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. We sabotaged their coffee. Long pause. Confusion and disbelief. The room went silent. Stunned silence. Blinking, eyebrows furrowed. What? Johansen asked, barely managing to hold back a confused laugh. Ted sat up straight, the chair creaking beneath him, and slammed his coffee cup down on the table with a clink. His eyes were wide, the look of a man who had seen too much. Hear me out, Ted said, his tone deadly serious now. We've been studying the Zarlaxians for years. They're a brutal race, but they have a weakness. It's the one thing that keeps them going, day in and day out. Commander Elise squinted, trying to understand. What weakness? Ted's gaze sharpened. They're addicted to coffee, stronger than any human could ever handle. It's how they power through their battles. Their troops drink vats of it, gallons. They need it to function. No coffee, no fight. Tension builds again, like the low rumble of a storm. Admiral Johansen leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Are you telling me that the fate of humanity is riding on their coffee addiction? Ted nodded slowly. Exactly. The room was still disbelieving, but Ted's confidence was infectious. He had the look of a man with nothing to lose, a mechanic turned savior with only one chance to save the day. Okay, Elise said, folding her arms. Suppose we could sabotage their coffee. How? Ted grinned, a lopsided grease-stained grin that only a mechanic could pull off. Simple. I've rigged a system in our stealth drones. We send them into the Zarlaxian ships, straight to their cafeterias. Then, narrative voice, with a hint of conspiracy, we replace their coffee with decaf. Sharp voice, a sharp intake of breath from the character. The room collectively gasped. Decaf, Commander Elise whispered, as if saying the word might summon dark forces. Johansen's mouth dropped open. Ted, that's madness. No, Ted corrected, shaking his head slowly. That's genius. The humans, with no other options and no better plans, put Ted's strategy into motion. The stealth drones flew under the radar, slipping into the Zarlaxian warships unnoticed. In a matter of hours, gallons upon gallons of potent Zarlaxian brew were quietly swapped with decaffeinated coffee. The next morning, the Zarlaxian armada approached Earth's orbit. Their ships hovered like an ominous storm on the horizon, ready to rain down destruction. But something was wrong. Inside the Zarlaxian command ship, General Kraft, a towering beast with jagged scales and piercing red eyes, took a sip of his coffee. His eyes narrowed in confusion. Something was off. Very off. This tastes weak, he growled, slamming the cup down. What is this? His subordinates hesitated, glancing at one another nervously. Sir, it's coffee, like always. Kraft's eye twitched. He could feel the effects, or rather the lack thereof, coursing through his veins. The jittery energy, the power that normally surged through him like a wildfire, was gone. His limbs felt heavy, his mind sluggish. The climax? Building tension again. The rest of the fleet felt it too. As the minutes ticked by, more and more Zarlaxians realized something was terribly wrong. Their once unstoppable forces were towsy. Their movements slowed. Their ships, once precise and coordinated, started drifting out of formation. And just like that, the Zarlaxian invasion fell apart. Dramatic conclusion. Back aboard the USS Indomitable, Ted sat in the command center, watching the chaos unfold on the holographic displays. A smile crept across his face as the Zarlaxians, too tired to fight, retreated back into the void of space. Admiral Johansson clapped him on the shoulder. Ted, I don't know how to say this, but you saved us all. Ted lifted his cup, took a slow, satisfying sip, and shrugged. All in a day's work, Admiral, all in a day's work. And so, humanity was saved. Not by laser cannons or nuclear missiles, but by the most powerful weapon of all, decaf.
Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe for more original content. New chapters and standalone stories uploaded weekly.